Monsters are real, and ghosts are real too. They live inside us, and sometimes they win. Stephen King. Welcome to Books in the Freezer, a podcast dedicated to the deliciously disturbing world of horror fiction. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Devin. And this week, the thrilling conclusion to our countdown of your favorite Stephen King novels on this episode of Books in the Freezer.
So we're here. It's officially the top 10. Well, if we want to get technical, like the top 9, there's a tie for number 9, but it's 10 novels. We got a few surprises in here. There's some I am kind of surprised they're this high up on the list for sure.
Yeah. I think we alluded to this last episode, but this is definitely not the top 10 I would have predicted. There's a couple of ones, you all know is going to be on here, but probably not in the spot you expect.
Yeah, we'll get to it when we get to the top 3. There was a big jump in the number of votes just from the 4th most popular to the 3rd most popular, and then it was like neck to neck.
This is one of those things where, like, if you didn't vote because, I didn't vote for it because it was obviously going to get 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, you probably cost it the top spot because... God, this was close for the top 3.
The difference between 2 and 3 was 1 vote.
Okay, and how about 1 and 2?
It was 5 votes.
So the total difference between 1, 2, and 3, like all together, was 6 votes cumulatively. So yeah, it was a really tight race for top 3. And surprisingly, because again, one of them I'm very surprised is so high up. Specifically, I will say.
It's like I knew that was a beloved book. I just didn't know it was like that beloved. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's a book I expected to be in the top 10, definitely, but not as high as it was.
All right, so are we done keeping people in suspense?
I think a recap is in order. So, number 14, we have Dolores Claiborne. Number 13, Bag of Bones. Number 12, Carrie. Number 11, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. Number 10, Needful Things. Without any further ado, here's the top 10 as voted by you, the listeners. As Steph has already informed you guys, there has been a tie for the number 9 spot. So technically, they're both number 9. First up, we have...
If anyone ever asks you what panic is, now you can tell them. An emotional blank spot that leaves you feeling as if you've been sucking on a mouthful of pennies.
Gerald's Game.
What's Gerald's Game about?
Gerald's Game is about a game of seduction that takes place between a husband and wife that goes horribly awry when the husband dies, but the nightmare has just begun. It's one of the newer kind of titles from Stephen King that I wasn't overly familiar with, honestly, until the adaptation came out. But dear God, this was good.
Yeah, I don't think I voted, but if I would have voted, this would have been my pick. Like, I think so far, and it's hard to say because I have read some books in the top 3 that are good, and I will admit that they are good. I loved Gerald's Game.
This is another one where I haven't read the original book, but the concept of it is just incredible. It's so minimalist, but then there's so much play. It's such a good playground for like just psychological horror.
Oh, this is, I think, psychological horror at its best. And I think I mentioned this. I don't know if I mentioned it with you or on the episode I did with Rachel, but I remember a coworker was telling me that she was reading this, and I asked her what it was about, and I thought, that sounds stupid. Because I was like, who wants to read a book about, like, nothing happening? Like, it's just a person just stuck in a bed. Like, really? For, like, hundreds of pages.
Yeah.
Why would I do that? But it's so much more than that.
And that is why, as mentioned in the last episode, this is Stephanie's father's pick.
Well, he and my mom watched the movie recently, and they thought it was really good, you know, it's very tense, a lot of suspense. And when I mentioned that it was a Stephen King book, he's like, oh yeah, put my vote down for that one then. That was great. Yeah, Jessie is just such a great protagonist, and there's so much great back and forth with what's going on to her in the moment, you know, with her being in the situation where she is handcuffed to a bed and her husband has died and they are in a remote cabin and no one can hear her. And what she has to deal with, like she has to reconcile some things from her past. So this book does have a lot of sensitive material that I think if you are someone who has had some sexual trauma in your past, you might just want to be aware of that maybe before you pick this up. I just like could not put this down. I just thought he did such a great job with everything in this. This is firmly in my favorites for Stephen King for sure. And I'm so happy it is in the top 10. I was kind of worried that it wasn't going to rank very high, but I was so excited when I was tallying up. I'm like, yes, it's getting its proper love.
Yeah, this one I kind of assumed would be high-ish on the list, mainly because, well, I'm sure in a part of it is because it is in the mindset right now, because, you know, anything with a recent adaptation is going to get a lot more attention. It's going to get a lot more buzz. So I did kind of expected it to kind of chart high, because I imagine people that didn't know about it, saw the adaptation, would go back, read the book, and then, you know, it would be there. But yeah, the praise I hear about it is endless. I don't know of any avid reader that has had negative things to say about Gerald's Game, so totally intrigued by this one.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, we are of course talking about the Michael Flanagan adaptation that came out a few years ago. If you watch the Haunting of Hill House Netflix show, you'll see a lot of the same actors being used in the projects, which was kind of a fun Easter egg. If you could say it's an Easter egg. It's just like, you know, directors like to use the same actors if they have a good experience with them. So you'll notice some familiar faces. I mean, Kate Siegel is his wife. Like, she's going to be in his movies. Our other number 9.
Life turns on a dime, sometimes towards us, but more often it spins away, flirting and flashing as it goes. So long, honey. It was good while it lasted, wasn't it?
Hi guys, it's Laura, longtime menace to the podcast. So I just want to speak up for 11/22/63 because I think the fact that I've read Stephen King for 20 plus years, and I would even consider one of his more recent works my favorite over some of the ones from the past, means a lot. It's a pretty simple story. I think you could make the argument that it's not horror, but I don't believe in obsessing over distinctions like that. It is just a very entertaining time travel story, and I really love it.
11/22/63.
Yay! It's the second biggest surprise for me.
Really?
To be in the top 10.
I would say this is the book that like non-horror fans pick up by King.
Yes. Like Laura says, it's not necessarily horror, but this is just a well done Stephen King novel. Really well done. It will appeal to just the mass, you know, literary audience more so than the diehard schlocky horror folk. At least that's my perspective on things. But what is it about?
This is about Jake Epping, who is a high school English teacher in Lisbon Falls, Maine, who comes across some bizarre secrets when it comes to light that his friend Al, the owner of the local diner, wants to enlist him to take over a mission that has become his obsession: to prevent the Kennedy assassination. How? By stepping through a portal in the diner's storeroom, of course, and into the era of Ike and Elvis, and of big American cars, sock hops, and cigarette smoke. Finding himself in warm-hearted Jody, Texas, Jake begins a new life, but all turns in the road lead to a troubled loner named Lee Harvey Oswald. The course of history is about to be rewritten and become heart-stoppingly suspenseful.
That's a deceptive tongue twister.
But all turns in the road lead to a troubled loner.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a tongue twister until you try and read it. Oh boy. Yeah, this one, my initial impression of this book when I first saw it in a bookstore is, holy God, that thing is huge.
Yeah, that's kind of still my thoughts when I see a physical copy. I'm like, oh my. Or I browse how long the audiobook is when I'm going through Libby, and I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
that is a commitment. Okay.
Yeah, this is what Brandon Sanderson would call a Chihuahua killer. I'm pretty sure. But that doesn't take away from the quality of the story. It means that it would be very difficult for me to get through it because this book would probably be like a 3-month commitment for me. I'm a very slow reader. But yeah, again, like my understanding of the plot, hearing the people talk about it and telling me their opinions and such, it does feel like it's more of more dramatic and supernatural-esque than horror, which again, we're not counting down the top scary Stephen King novels. We're talking about the favorites, and this one got a lot of support.
Yeah, Mark from the Goodreads group says 11/22/63 was his best, most immersive book. The book was a journey that spanned time and space, and you felt like you lived a lifetime with these fully formed characters. I mourned, I felt the highest joys, and the most extreme stress and worry in this book. It is a book that will take over your life.
And Laura, as a supplement to her, as a clip you heard moments ago, also added that he originally had the idea for this decades ago, but only felt he was good enough and informed enough to do the research and write it just recently.
She also says, we stan a storyteller who is realistic about his memes. You have to do it with clap emojis. We stan a storyteller.
I'm okay with the support and the praise for the man and his respect for the source material and the respect you give the topic matter, but I will never use stan that way in a sentence. I'm sorry, I'm way too old. I'm out of touch with the kids these days.
I think Laura's your age, so.
I'm just an old man. I'm a cranky old man.
And, of course, there was the adaptation that came out a few years ago, the miniseries on Hulu, starring James Franco as Jake Epping. Did you watch it?
I did not know it existed.
What?
Isn't that with James Franco?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Came out, like, I want to say 2015, 2016.
I'll be back in like 6 hours to finish the episode, okay?
I, for some reason, never finished it, but I started it and I remember enjoying it. Does that ever happen to you? Where I'm like, I watched 2 episodes of that. It was good. For some reason, I just never went back to it.
Yeah. I've had that with movies before. Well, like, none come to mind now, but I've had that with movies before where it's like, you know what? I remember telling somebody how good a movie this was, but I don't remember the movie. But I must have liked it.
Yeah. I think maybe I didn't want to finish it because I had it in my mind that I was going to read the book. I'm like, oh, this is really good. I'm definitely going to read the book and then come back to this.
And then you saw the tome.
Yeah, and then I looked at it and I was like, oh boy, that is a wow. I will eventually get to 11/22/63. That is on my list.
Yeah, which brings us to our number 8.
It's hard to let go. Even when what you're holding on to is full of thorns, it's hard to let go. Maybe especially then.
This is Joyland.
Okay, this is one I was surprised to see in like the top 10.
This is the biggest surprise I think on this list. For me, for sure.
I think on like one hand I get it because it is so very full of nostalgia, which is something Stephen King is very good at. And it's literally someone like looking back at a eventful summer in their life. But it's very different, I think, from his books, and I just like did not expect it to be here. Oh, but we didn't say what Joyland was about.
Set in a small town, North Carolina amusement park in 1973, Joyland tells the story of the summer in which a college student, Devin Jones, comes to work as a carny and confronts the legacy of a vicious murder, the fate of a dying child, and ways both will change his life forever. The main character is Devin. How did I not read this yet?
I don't know.
Wow, I didn't. But yeah, like this one, I feel like just came out of nowhere in terms of like, okay, maybe lower on the list, it could be a bit of a surprise. Oh, okay, people like this book, but to be number 8 in the top 10, that's I'm lost for words.
Yeah, it's got, like I said, the nostalgia, and it's very lovingly written nostalgia. I remember when I read it, I noticed that. And it's got, of course, the carnival atmosphere and I would say like a very light supernatural element at the end. But other than that, I would say it's much more like a noir type story, like a mystery. Like it was published by Hard Case Crime. But yeah, there seems to be a lot of love for Joyland.
I'll admit this book was absolutely nowhere near my Stephen King radar for books that I want to pick up, I want to get to, I feel like I should have read, but clearly there's something there that I did not know until now. Thanks to the listeners of Books in the Freezer, this one is moving up the list fairly rapidly, especially when I'm looking on Amazon, and it's available in Kindle, audiobook, hardcover, paperback, mass market paperback, audio CD, and there's a CD-ROM option.
A CD-ROM?
Yeah. In Polish, a CD-ROM audiobook.
Okay.
Which is weird. I almost want to buy it just to see what it is. But anyway, yeah. Again, this is the surprise of the entire list. Kudos to Joyland.
I mean, there's another one that I was surprised at.
Not in the same way.
No, yeah.
This one's the biggest surprise that it's on the list so far up. The other one, we'll get to.
All right. Number 7.
I am your number 1 fan.
It's Misery, baby.
Misery. Now this one is kind of where I expected it to be. Like,
yeah,
middle of the top 10 somewhere. Oh man, Annie Wilkes. What more can I say with Annie Wilkes that no one has already said?
Paul Sheldon. He's a best-selling novelist who has finally met his biggest fan. Her name is Annie Wilkes, and she is more than a rabid reader. She is Paul's nurse, tending to his shattered body after an automobile accident, but she is also his captor, keeping him prisoner in her isolated house.
As far as antagonists go in horror, she's definitely top 10 just for being crazy. I can't be articulate with this.
She is the fangirl of all fangirls.
Yeah. She is what people fear when they, have fans on the internet or viewers on the internet or listeners on the internet.
Is she toxic Reddit culture?
Pretty much. Before there was a Reddit, she was 4chan before there was 4chan.
Yeah.
And then again, to briefly talk about, you have Kathy Bates playing her in the adaptation, and oh my god, that was such a masterful role. Just brought it to life. Now, Regina from the Goodreads group said, Misery. It was so claustrophobic. These two characters playing cat and mouse in such a confined space.
Best actress in a leading role, Oscar baby, 1991.
So there you go. So Annie Wilkes is the role that actually got Kathy Bates the Best Actress Oscar.
Abby from the Goodreads group says, I also absolutely love Misery. I'd seen the film before I'd read it, and having the chapters of the book Paul is forced to write added so much for me. That may be a controversial opinion. Have you seen that viral video where that woman is cosplaying at Annie Wilkes and she's like yelling at a bookstore employee about why they don't have the Misery books by Paul Sheldon?
Yes.
I've had that shared by family members who are like, people these days are so entitled.
Yes, that's what I was about to say. Every time I've ever seen that video pop up, it's people saying, okay, what is wrong with this woman? Like, oh my god, like she's
Yeah.
absolutely insane. Just chill. She was literally doing marketing for a production of Misery. It was advertising. That's all that was. Relax. But she does it so well. Oh my god, she does it so well. I love that video.
Yeah. I'm like, she committed to the role.
But yeah, so getting back to the story at hand, this is definitively King. This is very minimal. This is two people alone in a cabin for pretty much the entire book, and it's just dialogue back and forth, and just in very uncomfortable, intense situation from beginning to end. Like, it's so well done.
I think one thing King does very well is like the tight, confined spaces, like Gerald's Game and Misery. I think that's something he does very well. I know people love him for his big, expansive works, but there's something just so effective about the tight, small scope of these stories.
Claustrophobia is what King does, I think, best. All right, and this brings us to our number 6.
People say, where there's life, there's hope. And I have no quarrel with that. But I also believe the reverse. There is hope. Therefore, I live.
Revival. And let's talk about it.
Yep.
In a small New England town, over half a century ago, a shadow falls over a small boy playing with his toy soldiers. Charles Jacobs, along with his beautiful wife, will transform the local church. The men and boys are all a bit in love with Mrs. Jacobs. The women and girls feel the same about Reverend Jacobs, including Jamie's mother and beloved sister, Claire. With Jamie, the Reverend shares a deeper bond based on a secret obsession. When tragedy strikes the Jacobs family, this charismatic preacher curses God, mocks all religious beliefs, and is banished from the shocked town. Jamie has demons of his own. Wed to his guitar from the age of 13, he plays in bands across the country, living the nomadic style of a bar band, rock and roll, while fleeing from his family's horrific loss. In his mid-30s, addicted to heroin, stranded, and desperate, Jamie meets Charles Jacobs again, with profound consequences for both men. Their bond becomes a pact beyond even the devil's devising, and Jamie discovers that revival has many meanings.
Dun, dun, dun.
This is a controversial pick, personally.
For you, have you read it?
No, but again, reputation, opinions of whom I trust. I don't know why it's number 6, guys.
Here's the thing. OG listeners of the podcast might remember that the first year-end episode that we did a best books and a worst books. And you may not remember. Some of you may remember. This was my worst book of the year. This was a book I physically threw across the room.
I won't lie. And guys, I mean absolutely no disrespect for the people that voted for Revival here, okay? This is not intending to be disrespectful, but there's a part of me that wondered if this wasn't a organized effort to troll Steph.
No, I don't believe that at all. There is so much love for this book. And my issue is with the ending, where I understand thematically with the themes of the book where it fits. To me, I felt like the way it was done came out of nowhere, and I felt betrayed as a reader. But some people genuinely, like when they talk about Stephen King's great endings, will mention Revival. So it works for some people. It did not work for me.
Right. And I happen to have been cursed with most of my friends that have read Stephen King or read as a pastime. I have yet to find one personally that enjoyed Revival. So I even third-hand information, I don't have much to go on in terms of what makes this appealing. I will say that just reading the synopsis, it does seem interesting.
Here's the thing. The ending hurt me so bad because I loved most of the book up until that point, and I felt like I was done dirty.
So this is literally a case of Stephen King is horrible at writing endings?
I felt like that. I was like, this is evidence of that. This book could have been perfect.
Okay.
I really loved it. It spans a long amount of time. You see these characters go through such big changes in who they are and their philosophies about things. And I mean, the ending is Revival has many meanings, and you literally see that. There is, the cover that has the circus tent, and, he was a minister. So there's like that kind of a revival. Like there's a lot going on thematically that I thought was done very well, but I hated that ending.
Like I said, this is the one that surprised me the most for how high it was up on the list in just terms of, like I said, anecdotal reputation. But again, a lot of people came in to support it. It
was on Twitter. It was a lot of you Twitter people came for this.
So Twitter put Revival just shy of the top 5.
Yeah, I won't forget that.
Speaking of number 5.
Oh, yeah. So you're going to do the voice?
No.
The Maine accent? You got to.
I don't know how to do it yet.
So here's number 5.
Oh my God. You almost got me wanting to try it. Sometimes dead is better.
There we go.
Hello, Freezer friends. P.T. Hilton here. Multiple Stephen King stories have seeped into the public consciousness, but the book I've selected to talk about is probably one of our greatest modern-day fairy tales, and that's Pet Sematary. This book is such a great example of how King deals honestly with the psychology of what it would be like to experience something you truly could not explain. For all the great twists and turns in Pet Sematary, much of the page count is devoted to how Louis Creed's understanding of reality has changed. He's a different person after he experiences the supernatural, and that drives his actions throughout the story as much as his grief does. Stephen King understands that being unmoored from the world of science and logic might be the most terrifying thing of all.
Hello.
it's Alex from Hey Little Thrifter. My favourite Stephen King novel is Pet Sematary. It's dark, emotional, and creepy. It's such an excellent read.
Pet Cemetery.
There you go. This one, I honestly may have predicted it to be higher.
I thought this was going to be top 3. Like, I would have bet money that this was top 3.
A lot of people thought this would be top. When we finished last episode and we asked for your predictions, we got messages and we got posts, people predicting what was top 3. Most people had Pet Sematary in that top 3. Here it is at number 5. So, Steph, what exactly is Pet Sematary about?
The road in front of Dr. Lewis Creed's rural Maine home frequently claims the lives of neighborhood pets. Lewis has recently moved from Chicago to Ludlow with his wife Rachel, their children, and pet cat. Near their house, local children have created a cemetery for the dogs and cats killed by the steady stream of transports on the busy highway. Deeper in the woods lies another graveyard, an ancient Indian burial ground, whose sinister properties Lewis discovers when the family cat is killed.
This is iconic, King. This is... When someone tries to name, when they try to name 5 Stephen King novels, Pet Sematary is generally going to be one of them. This is one that me and Steph actually buddy read earlier this year, and it was great.
I loved this book. This is, again, in my top for Stephen King books. It's like Gerald's Game, Pet Sematary, and others. We're not going to spoilers on that. But yeah, I just loved the themes of grief, and I know we talked about this when we read it together, but how there's characters that are so cemented in what their philosophies on life and death are until they are touched by a death that's close to them, and then, you know, their philosophies are really put to the test. And there's just some famous, viscerally horrifying scenes in here, and I think if you read this as a parent of small children, it just adds an extra layer of horrifying to it. But yeah, truly an amazing book.
In a book that has death of an infant.
A toddler.
Well, same thing. Death of a toddler. And you were still able to say how amazing it is.
Mm-hmm.
That shows skill.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's not something that... my understanding, and not putting words in your mouth, but that's something that I interpret as something that's very difficult for an author to do well and do right with you and still kind of enjoy the story.
Well, he didn't linger too much on the when it happened. It was more like there was a lead up and then we deal with like after.
Right.
It wasn't like this horrifying scene that we're going to paint and linger in for a chapter. So I think that would have been a bit much.
Yeah, this one definitely got the most audio clips.
Yes. A lot of you came to bat for this and I was not surprised.
And Jocelyn in the Goodreads group said, I'm obsessed with Pet Sematary. I love how it touches on universal human themes of family, death, grief, guilt, and faith. It was much more than a horror novel to me. I would probably say it's my favorite. I hated the new movie adaptation that came out this year, though. It was really not good.
I heard that.
I haven't seen the new one yet. I like the original one, but I did not see the new remake yet.
Yeah, I have not heard great things about the new adaptation.
That makes me sad.
Yeah, it looked kind of cool in the trailer. I always get tricked by trailers, though. They just got to put like cool tense music or like a cool song, and I'm like, do I want to watch this movie? Also, I know we talked about, this is one where Stephen King really sticks the landing on that ending.
Oh yeah, I agree. Somewhat ambiguous, but still very conclusive at the same time. I really liked it. It's one of the few Stephen King endings I really did enjoy. And that's going to bring us to our number 4.
The basis of all human fears, he thought. A closed door, slightly ajar.
Hi, this is Jason White from Jason's Weird Reads and the Darkness Dwells podcast. My favorite Stephen King novel. There's so many really good ones. I like his earlier work best, but I think I'm going to go with Salem's Lot. I usually do. And the reason for this is because I really absolutely love the town of Jerusalem's Lot. It's so fully realized. It's incredible to read about this town. And the characters are pretty good, but what I really like also are the vampires. They're nasty, they're mean, and they're, I think they're what vampires should be.
Salem's Lot.
So what's Salem's Lot about?
Salem's Lot is not about the Salem witch trials.
Oh, it is not.
Thousands of miles away from the small township of Salem's Lot, two terrified people, a man and a boy, still share the secrets of these clapboard houses and tree-lined streets. They must return to Salem's Lot for a final confrontation with the unspeakable evil that lives on in the town.
Have you read this one?
No.
I read it, I think, like 2 years ago.
I've read bits and pieces of it. I've read excerpts. This is the one where there's a montage of death, I believe, at one point. It's like short chapters where people just die in the end of it.
Mm-hmm. I remember there were specific scenes from this that I remember that stick out to me. I haven't seen the adaptation, but I know a lot of people like that. I thought this one would be top 3. Like, I said the top 3 was going to be in the number 3 spot. It was either going to be Salem's Lot or Pet Sematary. That was my guess.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people love it.
I could see Salem's Lot being like 4 or 5. I probably would have predicted 4 or 5 for Salem's Lot. Like, it's definitely a very recognizable one, not an obscure one by any means. But I feel like I think that gets etched out by things like Pet Sematary, by Carrie, and some of the others that are already in the top 3. I feel like if it was from a lesser author, it would be a top 3 novel. But King has so many more that I would perceive higher than it. That 4 and 5, I think, is a where I would have put it. But it's definitely a great story. Like, pick up a book called Salem's Lot, and it's not about witches, but it's about vampires. That by itself is enough to be like, wait, what? And then pick it up. And I think that may be why he did it. Stephen King is a smart man. So Shelley from the Goodreads group said, I love a good vampire story, and Salem's Lot had scenes that were so creepy to me. I remember being home alone in the middle of the night reading this book. At one point, I put it down and looked behind me. It definitely hit the creep factor for me. It was just such a great story. We are ready for top 3.
So as I mentioned, there was a big jump. Because, okay, I did it on a point system because a lot of people gave like 3 picks. So I assigned point totals for like their top pick. Actually, that might be too much information.
Yeah, we're not going to the nitty gritty.
Yeah. So I'm just going to tell you what like the top 5 were. Pet Sematary got 24 votes. Salem's Lot got 34 votes. And then coming in at number 3 with 55 votes.
Your hair is winter fire. January embers. My heart burns there too.
It's it.
Okay, what is it?
It's it.
Yeah, but what is it?
You got it, yeah.
What? Huh?
It's it by Stephen King.
Oh, it. Okay. Okay, sorry. That joke is totally not overdone. Literally more than 20 votes between 4 and 3. This is one I think everybody that guessed top 3 guessed it would be here.
Without a doubt, this wasn't all the top 3 guesses.
Yeah, this is a book on everyone's mind in terms of Stephen King because of the adaptation. Chapter 2 just came out, which was excellent. It's one of his most popular ones in general. But I mean, for those that don't know.
Welcome to Derry, Maine. It's a small city, a place as hauntingly familiar as your own hometown. Only in Derry, the haunting is real. They were 7 teenagers when they first stumbled upon the horror. Now they are grown-up men and women who have gone out into the big world to gain success and happiness. But none of them can withstand the force that has drawn them back to Derry, to face the nightmare without an end, and the evil without a name. It's got a good first line, too. The terror, that would not end for another 28 years, if it ever did, began so far as I can know or tell, with a boat made from a sheet of newspaper, floating down a gutter, swollen with rain.
Oh, man. That little boat going down the storm drain in Georgie, and we all float down here. I think I've used this word too much over the last 2 episodes, but it really does apply here. It is absolutely iconic in terms of the King universe. Honestly, in terms of horror in general, like the image of the hand coming up for the little boat. Like, there's people that have never read a book that will probably recognize that image from how popular this story is.
I mean, I watched the miniseries when I was younger, and it ruined storm drains for me. I remember walking home from school and going out of my way to avoid them, even a decade after I had seen it. Like, nope, you're not going to get me. Also, Chinese food was ruined for me for a bit. I mean, I was just like, I hope this is not going to turn into anything supernatural. Yeah, so Tara had a lot to say about it. She says, my favorite Stephen King book is It. Might be my all-time favorite book. It's almost like an inside joke to me why I love Stephen King so much. I grew up in a small town in Missouri, and I felt like I spent my whole life trying to get away, which I did and moved to Chicago. But all my favorite King books are set in a small town and there's drama. I just can't seem to get away from the small town. One of the reasons I love it so much is because it reminds me of my 2 childhood best friends. No matter the distance or time, we can always pick up where we left off. The book also forces each character to face their fears head on, some more successful than others. I can relate so much to the losers as kids. It makes me reflect on my own childhood and life to see how far I've come, cheesy as it sounds. The sentimental stuff is great, but the horror is even better. The mummy scene with Ben, Adrian Mellon at the carnival, the Easter egg hunt, the black spot incident are all realistically scary. I could see these events happening, and that's what makes King so scary. So I read this like right after my son was born. And I remember reading it and doing the audio. And I remember one part that really stuck with me was the description of the Easter egg hunt. Because it was just all of these little kids getting hurt. And there was just some horrific images, which they did mention and they did show in the It Chapter 1 when Ben is doing research in the library. Like some of the horrifying images that I remember from the book are in like the newspaper article that he's reading.
Right, yeah. Which, while you're reading the book, kind of feels like filler. But
yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm like, it's something that it's like, you know, he's reading this like newspaper article. Or I think in the novel, it's not Ben, it's Mike.
Well, no.
Because Mike is the like historian.
Yeah, that's right.
And he has like, he has all the like old history stuff.
Yeah, it shows Mike basically as the kids got up and left Derry, Mike stayed in Derry and he spent his life dedicated to figuring out what it was, basically. So he was trying to find the history of Derry and all this and talking to people, and the like intermission kind of chapters were the ones where it shows his history.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was like that, and I remember listening to it and folding laundry and thinking like, ooh. But there's a lot. I really loved it. Definitely in my top Stephen King books for sure. Even I would say, even if the adaptation hadn't come out.
Right. I agree. Same here. Shelley from the Goodreads group had this to say. What is not to love about an evil entity killing children? The book was great. I enjoyed seeing the child side as well as the adult side. Granted, after seeing the miniseries as a kid, I had dreams that Pennywise was trying to kill me. This could also be part of the reason why I consider it scary and among my favorites. And
I think that miniseries messed all of us up.
Tim Curry was Bay. Wow, did I just use Bay in a sentence? Oh my god.
Oh, I thought you said A and you were going to fill in the blank.
No, I said Bay.
So you can say Bay, but you have a problem with Stan.
Yeah, let's not talk about my complicated psyche right now, okay?
So in like 5 years, are you going to be okay saying Stan?
I'll get back to you on that.
But yeah, I think there was a whole generation of us that were messed up by that miniseries.
And I'm a lifelong fan of Tim Curry based on that miniseries. And then number 2.
Mm-hmm. And
it's your quote too.
Oh, is it? Do I read it?
You do the quote, yes. How many votes was it?
55?
56.
This is the one that was by 1.
Yeah. And that brings us to number 2 with 56 votes, which means, yes, it had one more vote than it.
The place where you made your stand never mattered. Only that you were there and still on your feet.
The Stand.
This is my surprise for top 3.
See, this is the one where I feel like it is a surprise, and I wouldn't have said it was top 3, but I think that would be not giving the listeners enough credit, because I do, if you look at like Stephen King aficionados, they will say that The Stand is like his magnum opus. That's like his big masterpiece. But it doesn't necessarily get talked about in mainstream conversations with Stephen King because it's not as flashy. It's not as in your face as like it.
I guess it's also like important to the larger lore of Stephen King because of Randall Flagg.
Yeah, this is a book that basically ties everything together. All the stuff he's done for decades, it all kind of comes to a head in The Stand. So, I mean, yeah, this one is very significant to Stephen King in terms of his world building, in terms of his career too, because this is the one that kind of is the transition between like the writer he was and the writer he is. Because this was very difficult for him to write, I remember him talking about it in On Writing. But, Steph, what is The Stand about?
You tell me.
Okay, I will. This is the way the world ends, with a nanosecond of computer error in a Defense Department laboratory and a million casual contacts that form the links in a chain letter of death. And here is the bleak new world of the day after. A world stripped of its institutions and emptied of 99% of its people. A world in which a handful of panicky survivors chooses sides, or are chosen. Based on that plot, I still wouldn't know what The Stand is about. Not gonna lie.
It's like a apocalypse, but it's like the biological. It's not like, I guess, like a sickness that takes over. I've read like the first couple chapters and then I put it down because I was very overwhelmed. And I remember why. I picked it up right after I had finished Swan Song by Robert McCammon. That was just like too similar. And I'm like, I don't think I can read two like a post-apocalyptic epics back to back. I'm going to need some time in between.
The thing that I've been told the most about The Stand is that reading The Stand without being kind of well read on Stephen King books would kind of be like watching Cabin in the Woods as your first horror movie.
I see. So is there like a lot of, it's full of Easter eggs?
Oh, for the Stephen King universe? Yeah, like even just Randall Flagg and the nature of who Randall Flagg is. I'm not going to go into details, obviously, but just it ties in so much and brings together so many things that, like, if you were not a Stephen King like reader, you would still enjoy it. It's still a really well done, masterpiece of post-apocalyptic horror. But if you know more about the general universe, like almost multiverse that Stephen King is writing, there's a lot more you can pick up on. I'm trying to do this without like going into too much spoilers because a lot of you have obviously read The Stand. It's number 2 on our list, but if you haven't, it's one I don't want to ruin anything for because of, again, how interconnected this is to pretty much everything he wrote up to this point, and even some things he wrote after. What did Shelley in the Goodreads group say, Steph?
She said, "The Stand was such an epic book about good versus evil. I really enjoyed the way he dives into each person. There are those are bad, but then you see their backstory and can also empathize with them. It was so well written." And I think if you listen to our post-apocalyptic horror episode, PT, who we heard from earlier for Salem's Lot, had a lot to say about The Stand. I know he's a big fan of the book. I have the complete and uncut edition on my shelf, so I'm a little intimidated. Like, it is so fat, it is like fatter than the binding. It's a paperback. And my copy is 1,153 pages.
Right. So it's up there with it as being a doorstop. And
there's that new miniseries adaptation. I think it's going to be on CBS.
Nice. I did not know about that one.
Yeah. Ooh, starring James Marsden. Hello.
Nice. Okay, the best way I think describe The Stand is that if you go up to a person on the street and say, what's the best Stephen King book? You'll probably hear It. You'll probably hear Our Number One. You'll probably hear things like that, like common, movies with really popular adaptations or just really popular books. But I think if you go up to like a hardcore like Stephen King fan, you will get The Stand as an answer way like fairly frequently. But it's more of a, you know, advanced Stephen King fan maybe.
Maybe. I guess that makes sense. I just thought it would be like maybe top 5, but I guess we are dealing with like people who not only like horror fiction, but who are Stephen King fans.
Well, exactly, yeah. Like, if we were to put this as a public poll and not direct it to, like, our listeners and just be, like, to just a general audience of mainstream horror fans, The Stand might not rank all that high. But the fact that, you know, our audience are readers who are big fans of Stephen King, there's a solid chance, like I said, they'll pick up on all the little things and the interconnected things, and that will make Stand that much more of a memorable read.
Definitely. Do you think we're ready to talk about our number 1 pick?
I think it's probably time. This pick is a pick 2 years in the making. Wendy, darling, light of my life, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to bash your brains in.
Why do you have a copy of The Shining in your freezer?
Oh, I was reading it last night and I got scared, so.
But you're safe from it if it's in the freezer?
Well, safer.
It's The Shining. And no, we did not plan this because it is the book in the freezer.
This is the novel that gives this podcast its namesake. Mainstream or hardcore fan, this is one of the top books of Stephen King you're probably going to get. With us and our listeners here, it's number 1. Undoubtedly, like, most people trying to guess the top 3 threw The Shining in there. It has probably the most controversy in terms of its adaptation as well, with how like iconic the film version ended up being in terms of mainstream horror as well, with King really not enjoying it. And how they're 2 different beasts. Like they're basically almost 2 different stories.
So do we want to know what it's about?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what this novel is about.
Jack Torrance's new job at the Overlook Hotel is the perfect chance for a fresh start. As the off-season caretaker at the atmospheric old hotel, he'll have plenty of time to spend reconnecting with his family and working on his writing. But as the harsh winter weather sets in, the idyllic location feels even more remote and more sinister. And the only one to notice the strange and terrible forces gathering around the Overlook is Danny Torrance, a uniquely gifted 5-year-old.
Yeah, there's not going to be much we're going to be able to say about this that has not already been said ad nauseum by every single horror or Stephen King or both fan on the internet.
Book Wendy Torrance, much better than Stanley Kubrick movie Wendy Torrance. I think we mentioned this before. I like both. They're both very different in the way they approach this story, and I enjoy them both.
Yeah, same here. People, when they say that, oh, well, The Shining's not really a good adaptation because it's so different from the source material, but I think, no, it made that story and put it in the medium of film the best way it could, and they're both masterpieces, which is a word that's thrown around a lot, but again, it does certainly apply in this case.
I think Gloria from the Goodreads group put it best. I also love The Shining. I don't think I need to explain why. It's the Shining.
Pretty much. That sums everything up in a clear, concise, and succinct way. Thank you, Gloria. Jill wasn't as succinct, but she says, The Shining was my favorite Stephen King novel. The first Stephen King book I ever read was Cujo, and I really enjoyed that book. However, when I read The Shining, I fell in love with King's writing. The story has it all, with the sad story of the Torrance family and the horrors of the hotel. I read this story for the first time when I was 12. I have read this novel several times since, and I usually don't reread a lot of books.
And Tightrope to the Sun on the Goodreads group says, my favorite is hands down The Shining. It was the first King I ever read, and I read it on vacation in Italy, so what gets me about this one is how terrifying it is to think about a person who you love and trust more than anyone else in the world suddenly becoming someone else entirely and trying to murder you. That's terrifying.
Yeah, like, I mean, what else is there to really say? Like, The Shining
was the first book I ever read out loud to my son.
And you find that a lot. Like, honestly, this book is already so popular, so well done. There's almost no positive adjective that I could think of that doesn't apply to it. It's to the point where I'm overwhelmed with what to even say about it. because like it has all been said and it is all justified. Like this book is, if I was trying to get somebody into horror as a genre, this is one of the, if not the first book I would probably get them to pick up.
Ooh, especially in winter.
Oh yeah.
I'd say if you can arrange that where it's like winter and you're inside and you're reading, definitely this one.
Yep.
Or Misery. Misery is a close second on that.
So yeah. So that's it, guys. That is the favorite Stephen King novels as voted by you, the listeners. Do me a favor, go up in the doc and just put them in there above. By all means, if you guys, now that you've heard the entire list, have any, disagreements, agreements, thoughts on, what went down, any surprises, anything like that, feel free to let us know. You know how to contact us. We're available all over the place.
Get in touch with us.
And with that, let's get to our chilling obsession, Steph.
My chilling obsession is a podcast, and it's called Welcome to Deadcast, which, if you read Goosebumps books growing up, you know that is a play on the first Goosebumps book, Welcome to Dead House. So in this podcast, there are two brothers. I think they're twins, but I'm not 100% certain on that. But they go over all of the Goosebumps books in the series and kind of do a recap and a ranking. And I'm really loving this because my son, who's 5, is watching the 90s series and he's really enjoying it. So I like watching an episode and then listening to an episode that goes over the book, and then at the end they go over the series episode and kind of talk about the differences. And I love that they are legit fans. They know all of the books forward and back, and they've reread them recently and talk about what they thought of them when they were younger and they were older. They are absolutely hilarious. They lovingly snark on all the child overacting and sometimes underacting or weird line delivery on the show. They point out things that are in every Goosebumps book. All Goosebumps books will have a redheaded character.
Okay.
Or sometimes there's home scene layout things that don't make sense. It'll be described as a ranch house, but then someone will run upstairs type of thing. So they always point out stuff like that. And listening to these episodes has made me realize R.L. Stine loved a good twist ending. I did not remember how many twist endings there were in Goosebumps, but I am loving doing this revisit with this podcast. It cracks me up.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember that. Pretty much every novel ended with a crazy twist where the bad guys win or the monster's not really gone.
Or you're a robot, or this isn't really Earth. They're just crazy. So what about you?
For me, mine, surprise, surprise, is going to be a video game. My chilling obsession this week is going to be a game called 10 Miles to Safety. This came out on the 21st of October, so it's a relatively brand new game. The way this works is, it's a top-down game where you are trying to traverse basically 10 miles from where you begin to safety. Go figure. All the while, you are rummaging through basically what's a zombie apocalypse. So what happens is, as you're traveling, you don't really make, because you got to scavenge for materials and resources and such, and it's a zombie apocalypse. There's zombies everywhere, so you need to go into random homes as you're traveling and bunker down for the night and fortify yourself and get ready for the zombie horde that attacks every night. So the idea is, it's kind of like a normal zombie apocalypse game that you would play where you're building up defenses and such, but you're doing it on the move, as I feel like you would do in a real zombie apocalypse. So yeah, it's kind of a nomadic sense of zombie survival. Came up by him from an indie game developer called Trick Jump Games, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's not necessarily scary. It's kind of cartoony graphics, looks kind of funny, but it's a general good time.
Fun.
Yeah. And well, that is going to bring us to our last order of business, which is essentially and regrettably, this is going to be my last episode as a full-time host of Books in the Freezer. I am not as prepared as Rachel. I don't have anything prepared to say at this point in time. Unfortunately, it's just this is a time when I'm not able to dedicate to the podcast like I really need to. It's been an amazing trip. It's been an amazing opportunity. This year has been indescribable. I think I summed it up pretty well at the outro for the Fireside Chat episode with Rachel and Steph a few weeks ago. But yeah, Books in the Freezer has been an unbelievable experience for me. It's just right now there is so many things going on, both my personal life and even my professional life, that I don't have the ability to essentially commit to it like I really would love to. So unfortunately, that does mean I will be stepping away from the podcast. I still intend to be around, guys. I still will be lurking in the Voxer chat. I'll be probably poking my head in Goodreads a lot more often now too as well. Yeah, you guys have all been amazing. Like the experiences I've had here has been. I'm gonna not oversell it because I mean this, but it has legitimately been life changing. The things I've got to do, the things I've got to experience being part of this podcast. The listeners have been great. Steph, you have been incredibly patient with me through a really difficult time in my life. I tried to make it not affect the podcast, and sometimes it did, but we recovered, and Steph has been a saint with her patience with me when, things didn't go like they should. I assure you all, this is a very happy time. It's just things are kind of chaotic right now, and it means I will need to step away. But I won't be gone too far. For what it's worth,
still be able to keep in touch. Know where you live on the interwebs.
You'll know where to find me, and like I said, I'll still be around in Voxer. I'll still be harassing you guys when there's call-outs for public opinion on stuff. I will be voicing my concerns because I just can't not ramble about things. Everyone knows this. So
yeah, I don't have a replacement co-host at this point. It just, as has been shown for the past 2 years, is like a crazy amount of responsibility. So I will have guests on. I do have the next couple episodes planned out, so no need to worry about that. And yeah, next week we have an exciting guest, but not like super exciting. I feel like when I say that, people think I have like Stephen King on. Like, get your expectations like really low. Like, I think it's exciting. Maybe not exciting for you.
Yeah, really? It's just me coming back as a special guest? After I stopped doing the podcast. Yeah.
Well, it's been fun, Devin.
It has.
I'm trying to get sentimental.
We've had some really good times, Dev.
Yeah.
And on that note, guys, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for this entire year. It's been amazing. And I know I say amazing way too much when I'm not scripted, so that's how you know I'm not scripted. But that's it. We'll see you guys next time.
Books in the Freezer is a bi-weekly podcast. We post episodes every other Tuesday. You can find us on Twitter at BooksFreezerPod or on Instagram at Books in the Freezer. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/booksinthefreezer, or we have a Facebook group if you want to join that. You can send us an email at booksinthefreezer@gmail.com. Show notes for this episode and all previous episodes are at booksinthefreezer.com. We are on Patreon as Books in the Freezer, and I will have to do some restructuring and refiguring things out, so keep your eye on that. I'm Stephanie. You can find me on Twitter at lady_gagnon, that's LADY_GAGNON, or on Instagram at That's What She Read, and that's with 2 A's, or on YouTube at That's What She Read, just normally.
And I'm Devin for the last time. You can find me on Twitter at InsomniReads or over on Twitch streaming horror games at Indie Insomniac.
So join us next time for Books in the Freezer.